Welcome to Brookline Booksmith's author event series. My name is Megan O'Brien. I'm the event director here at the Booksmith. Tonight it's my pleasure to introduce Alexis Soloski, moderated by Sarah Weinman. Before I get to the fun part, I want to note that if you pre-ordered a book and haven't picked it up, or if you want to buy a copy of either Alexis's or Sarah's books, you can do so at the register in the corner at the end of the event. Thank you so much for buying books with us. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our guests and the book we're here to talk about before handing the stage over. We're very grateful to have moderator Sarah Weinman with us here tonight. She is the author of The Real Lolita and Scoundrel, and editor of several anthologies, most recently Evidence of Things Seen, True Crime, and An Era of Reckoning. She writes the crime and mystery column for the New York Times Book Review, and her work has also appeared in New York Magazine, The Atlantic, Esquire, Vanity Fair. She also writes the Crime Lady newsletter. Our author of the evening, Alexis Soloski, is a prize-winning New York Times culture reporter and a former lead theater critic at the Village Voice. She has taught at Barnard College and Columbia University, where she earned her PhD in theater. She lives in Brooklyn with her family, and Here in the Dark is her first novel. So about that first novel. In a starred review, Bookpage said that Here in the Dark is a tightly paced and expertly crafted noir whose heroine is both hilariously wisecracking and deeply troubled. From curtain up to curtain call, Here in the Dark is flawless. In their review, Bustle quipped, "Good luck not finishing in one sitting," so I'm sorry about the lack of sleep you'll get later tonight. Hopefully it's worth it. Protagonist Vivian Perry likes the dark. A former actress, she now works as a junior theater critic at a major Manhattan magazine. Her nights are spent beyond the lights in a reserved seat, giving herself over to the shows she loves. By day, she savages them with words sharper than a knife. Angling for a promotion, she reluctantly agrees to an interview, a conversation that reveals secrets she thought she had long since buried. Then her interviewer disappears, and she learns that she was the last person to have seen him alive. Assuming the role of amateur detective, Vivian turns her critical gaze toward an unsanitary private eye, a sketchy internet startup, a threatening financier, fake blood, and one very real corpse. As she nears the final act, she finds that the boundaries between theater and the real world are more tenuous and more dangerous than even she could have believed. ... So on that ominous note, I give you Alexis Soloski and Sarah Weinman.
Thank you all for coming tonight, especially on this extremely cold evening in January, but it's so great to celebrate Alexis and this amazing debut novel that when I first read it, it knocked my socks off, and then I read it again to prepare for this event tonight, and I just was like bowled over all over again. So I guess I know that you want to read, but I wanted to start with just a couple of questions. Before that, first of all, you do so much, especially as a culture reporter for the Times, and now you've written a novel, but why this novel? Why a noir novel? Like, why, just why?
So I would say that there wasn't a lot of choice in the matter, that this wasn't a book that I decided to write. This was a book that kind of wrote me. So if you know me, and a couple of you do, hi, I'm so fun, but I'm also a really boring person, and this is easily the most interesting thing that has ever happened to me in my whole life, which is that when I was in my 20s working at the Village Voice, a man called The Voice asked to interview me. It's different in the novel, but in my life, he said he was a journalist writing for one of the online sites, and he was writing about critics, how people get to be critics, how they develop their preferences. We did the interview. I was in grad school at the time and reading all the theory, and I was insufferable. Like, I talked into his very nice, like, mini Discorder for 2 hours about the death of the avant-garde. Like, I am fun at parties. And then he left. He didn't follow up. I thought, well, that's because I speak in paragraphs, no notes. Like, I nailed it the first time. And then I got a call from a woman, his fiance, saying that he had gone missing, and I was the last person to have seen him. And I did end up talking to a private eye, although only on the phone. I'll read a scene where Vivian talks to a real one because, delicious. And I did end up going to the police when I thought I had evidence that something had happened to this man. But at a certain point, I let it go because I am not a detective. And also, it was unsettling. It was a little bit destabilizing to not know. And because I am pretty stable, and I have friends, I have family, I have a decent support network, I could let it go. I could say, okay, I don't know, and I'm not going to know, and I'm fine with that. But I've always wondered what happened, what could have happened, and so it was only a matter of time before I had dreamed up a heroine who, instead of saying, oh, no, thank you, was going to say yes, and was going to run toward danger rather than away from it. So, I mean, when life kind of hands you like a plot, like on a platter, you know, with like, you know, parsley and like little orange slices, like a fancy garnish all around, like you can't send it back. Like it's already there. And noir, I love noir. I mean, I love noir. I love the romance of it. I love the spark of it. I love the way the dialogue just sort of pings down the page. I love the style of it. I'm a huge fan of California noir, from California, and I love the sun, I love the shadow. So, you know, Raymond Chandler, Dashiell Hammett, Dorothy B. Hughes, the greatest. All of that, and so noir seemed, and noir is also a heightened genre. It's a very performative genre. Like no one really talks like how they talk in noir, but don't you wish they did? And so something about that heightened style or that performative style seemed like it would be a good fit for this story.
So before I get into my next question, I was curious. Did you ever find out what happened?
I never
Did you want
found
to?
out.
Like that feels like your fiction brain went in one direction, but your journalist brain, you almost had to shut it off.
Just like my human person brain more than my journalist brain said, this is not good, whatever this is. Don't.
It's like there was a force field. You're like, nope, not going there.
So at some point after all of this had happened, maybe 6 months, maybe a year, there was an email, and I do think that if I had answered that email, I would have learned more, but I just deleted it. It had gotten frightening. At the one point I was sleeping with a knife under my bed, you know, just in case. just in case you wake up in the middle of the night eating snacks or to defend yourself. And at that point I was like, I don't think this is for me.
So how fun was it to write Vivian Perry as a character, since she is in a way so different from yourself? But you also have to inhabit her and make all these decisions for her and choose the direction in which she's going to go throughout the whole novel. So, I mean, was it fun? Was it harrowing? Was it all of the above? Like, what sort of emotional states were you finding yourself in?
It's so fun. Sarah, you know, I make such safe choices. I make safe choices all the time. I make the safest choices. You know, I have young children, and I'm a very, like, do you have your helmet kind of a person. And I'm not a big psychoanalytics person, you know, a little here and there, but like I do love the sort of Jungian idea of the shadow self, and there's a lot of shadow self in Vivian Perry. Like I am not this lady, and that's good because like she's not okay, you know, like to be okay. But it is exciting to have someone who just runs toward danger rather than away from it and makes the dangerous choice instead of the safe one, because people who make the safe choice, I don't think they're that interesting to write about. And also
Well, how do you have conflict if they're just constantly making the same choice?
Right, or like me, just apologizing for everything, just a little.
Wait, are you Canadian?
Well, I am a woman, so I'm at least a little bit Canadian. But I have been socialized to apologize for everything. And I was having a conversation with one of my editors the other day, one of my TV editors, who's great and who knows me very well. And a publicist was being very difficult. And I said, well, I sent her a very shirty email. And then I paused and I said, well, by shirty, I mean, he's like, oh, you apologize one less time? And I'm like, yes. And I took out several exclamation points. So she is not someone, she performs, absolutely. But she is not someone who stands on ceremony. She is not someone who needs people to like her. She is not someone who cares what other people think. And my God, is that freeing. It's so nice to walk around for a day not caring. Just sounds like it would be such a holiday. So it was a holiday to write. And it is fun. It's so fun to write dialogue. And I'm so glad no one can see me when I'm writing. My favorite way to write is at home in bed with the covers pulled up and like all the shades pulled down, so that no one can see me. It's like I'm mouthed aloud to the voices. But yeah, so fun inhabiting the character. Although I will say, I'm not this person emotionally because I have been to therapy and and it worked.
Well, you did describe a few, maybe one or two instances where Vivian goes to therapy and it doesn't go well.
It doesn't go well, but I did give her like a lot of my taste, and I did give her a lot of my thoughts and feelings when it came to the theater. So there was a lot of me in there, and it's funny because when the book was out on submission, I would get, kind of like filtered feedback from my agent. And the feedback almost across the board was, love the book, love the writing, love the style, hate the main character, just hate her, like can't get into her at all. I was like, you guys, it's me. you're so mean.
How dare you reject me?
Yeah, how dare you? But so it's very not me, but there's also a lot of me. But the not me parts are very freeing, I think.
So I know you're going to read a section, but before you do, there was one paragraph that I was like, when I read it the first time, I was like, oh my God, and then it has been cited in some other places, which is, warmth is not my forte. As far as the rich palette of human experience goes, I live on a grayscale. Aristotle said that drama was an imitation of an action. I am, of necessity, an imitation of myself. A sharp smile, an acid joke, an abyss where a woman should be. Except when I'm seeing theater, good theater, when I'm in the dark, at that safe remove from daily life, I feel it all. Rage, joy, surprise, until the house lights come on and break it all apart again. I am alive. Now, that to me, it feels like a manifesto for not just Vivian, but just for anybody who's pursuing a life in art and a life in criticism. And I wonder if you sort of saw it that way.
I think so, although I hope that those people are healthier and that they've done the work too. I hope that there are other ways that they have of accessing their humanity. But, I do feel that there are those of us, and I don't know if it's a dissociation or a sensitivity or a predilection or what it is, but, or I don't know if this is a gift of art, but like in my own life, I don't cry very often. Like during the pandemic, it happened, as I was like trying to like video school 2 kids, like the closet was mommy's special crying place. But when it's not a global pandemic, I'm pretty tear-free. But I cry at books, I cry at movies, I cry at plays all the time. Like there's something about experiencing things mimetically rather than full on that is so much more intense to me than my own life. And that's probably lucky. I'm probably lucky that I don't have a life, that has sort of like huge peaks and valleys. I don't want that. But I do love it. I do love it for my art. I do, it's so exciting to like go to a movie or go to a play or open a book and think, I'm really gonna feel something. Because I have a lot of days where like, I don't feel that much, they just kind of brush by, and like it's exciting to have that kind of emotional access.
But at the same time, because of how much theater in particular that you have seen,
Too much. I
and
think
you
we can
go
all
in,
agree.
and within like a few seconds, you can know that this isn't. It's like, oh really? This is how I have to spend the night. I'm a book critic, not a theater critic, but I've been to enough plays and I've had a similar sensation. And with books, you can often know within the first paragraph that it's just not going to work for you. And sometimes you could just set it aside. But let's say you're on assignment and you have to review it and you're stuck. So how does it feel when you know that you're stuck?
So the nice thing about bad plays, I think, is that they're very meditative because they give you a lot of time to think. Because you're probably not going to be thinking about the play, So it's a nice time to sort of like take stock, sort of like take your emotional temperature, see how you're feeling. Think about what you forgot at the grocery store. Honestly, it can be like
bad theater is like doing yoga?
It can be a kind of meditation. It can be a time to kind of like check in with yourself, and I also sometimes just count seconds. And I'm like, when I get to 300, 5 more minutes, we'll have elapsed. But those are dark nights. I know.
And then you have to transform that feeling into some actionable...
Into coffee.
Coffee.
Into coffee. It's all coffee. Yeah.
So speaking of copy, would you read a little bit from Here in the Dark?
I would love to read a little bit from Here in the Dark. How nice of you to suggest it. So I'm going to read the part where she goes to visit the unsanitary PI on Canal Street, or just off Canal Street. The PI's building houses a Malaysian restaurant at street level. A cook on a smoke break glares at me and flicks his cigarette too close as I shove the glass door open to shrieks of grinding metal. The stairs, swathed in a stained runner, the green of penicillin creak at every step. Sections of the banister have crumbled away. I've streamed the occasional black and white noir, so I'm half expecting a smoked glass door with Sam Spade lettering, but instead I find a cheap wooden one splintered around the knob. I knock, and the growl from the phone invites me in. The front room doesn't look much like an office. There's a futon covered in a greasy sheet, a ragged rag rug, a pot displaying a ficus long deceased. Behind a dusty wooden desk sits the PI, a white man stranded somewhere in his 60s. With his fat, stubbled cheeks and unruly graying riglets, he doesn't look much like a PI either, more like a cherub gone to seed. On his desk, a stack of creased manila folders abut a glass ashtray where a dozen half-smoked cigarettes molder. Nearby sits a takeout container from the Malaysian place, a single noodle lurching tentacle-like over the side. Jake Levitz hauls himself out of the chair, and before I can stop him, he swims his hand forward, pressing the rough nicotine-stained pads of his fingers against mine in a boneless shake. Then he waves me toward the futon. Sit, glad you made it. It's Vivian, right? You go by Viv? Only under duress. Okay, Vivian it is. Call me Jake. You want something to drink? I've got water and... Nope, I finished all the pop. Just water. I'm good, I say, lowering myself gingerly to the sheet. You want a cigarette? I don't smoke. Yeah, I'm trying to cut down. Jake gestures to a pharmacy bag on the shelf behind him. Got the patches, gonna start wearing them. He opens one of the folders, hefting a pencil in his pudgy fingers. So, Vivian, let's do this. You met with David Adler 2 weeks ago on Tuesday? Yes, around 2 in the afternoon. He said he wanted to interview me for a project on critics, how we develop our practice, our style. It was research for his thesis, he said. We met at a patisserie near my house. What's his patisserie called? He asked, clearing his throat wetly. La Religieuse. La what? I spell it for him, slowly. So what all did he ask you about? Theater mostly, my favorite playwrights, my favorite plays, boring if you're not in the business. I go to plays, he says, tapping his pencil against the paper. Do you? Of course he does. He takes his aged mother to a matinee musical every spring with a stop at Junior's for cheesecake after. Yeah, saw the Beckett one acts at the East Side last month. You go, you like him? This surprises me. Yes, I did. Rockabye especially. Me, I love that one with the mouth. Crazy. So anyway, you and the subject, that's what we call Adler, the subject. You meet at this cafe, you eat some pastry, you praise Melpomene. You know the Greek muse of drama? Lady, he says, raising his eyebrows in my general direction. I know all kinds of stuff that would knock your bobby socks off. Never know what'll come in handy on a case. That's what they teach you in PI school. I once broke a fraud ring just because I knew who won the 69 series. Who? Mets in 5. Back to your pastry date. David, how'd he seem to you? Seem? Yeah, you know, appear, act, behave. I can hear Hamlet in my head. Seems, madam, nay, it is. Because I don't really know how to answer the question. Do I describe the David Adler who interviewed me or the man I caught a glimpse of as we finished? Nervous, I say finally, or that was how he seemed at first. He said something about how he hadn't done a lot of interviews before. He had a chocolate croissant. Is that relevant? Could be, could be. There's something else I ought to tell him, some further detail, but my mind has shelved it just out of reach. By the way, I say, where was he enrolled? I tried to look him up online. Some school in New Jersey's what I heard, not sure which, though I guess I should probably talk to his dean or supervisor or whatever. Came to the city to finish his master's, whatchamacallit, thesis. Hey, that reminds me. Funny story about New Jersey. He leans forward in his chair. The metal makes an affronted screech. Last month I went out to Sea Caucus on a case. There was this escort, see? She had this one John. No. On second thought, I shouldn't say more. Might offend your ladylike sensibilities. Who says I'm so ladylike? Never seen someone sit on a couch while trying not to actually touch it. Nicely observed. They teach you that in PI school? Lady, there is no PI school. Maybe I'm just not trying to get period blood all over your sheet. He sits back, the chair screams, and raises his hands in a gesture of surrender. Okay, point yours.
I mean, it's so clear how much fun you were having.
It's fun.
Right?
I know. This was my one concern when I saw the very sexy cover they had given the book. Well, two concerns. One I'll get to in a minute. But I was like, are people going to know that there are jokes here when they see this? Because I worried. The second concern was that, like, there's actually way more sex in the second book I've written. And I was like, oh, great. What's the cover to that going to be? Just like tits, tits, tits. So apologies to the live stream. So, yeah.
One thing that also came through in that excerpt, but also throughout the whole book, is the way you describe the city. Like, just the different New York neighborhoods. Here it's Chinatown, and then, like, Vivian is going all around town, just going from party to party and bed to bed, and like, what did you sort of draw from to create your version of this city?
I mean, so I have, if I can just pat myself on the back for a second, I have a decent imagination for characters. It's not hard for me to sort of dream someone up, to think about how they might behave, how they might speak, but I have almost no visual imagination. And so every place in the book is pretty much a place I've been, because I just need to sort of cannibalize and magpie from my own sort of ghost map of New York. I mean, having been a journalist in New York for so many years and spent like a weird, I don't know, like 6-year period writing for the style section where I just like hung out with celebrities while they did weird things. My ghost map of New York is theaters, cheap eats, playgrounds for my children, and like that time I went to cooking class with Elizabeth Olsen, so everything is drawn from that particular ghost map. So a lot of it takes place in the East Village, which was where my first apartment was.
Yeah. And Tompkins Square Park in particular.
And Tompkins Square Park, and that, those were the first 2 years I lived in the city, and that was really formative. But yeah, I mean,
I have to admit, I was a little surprised that was Veselka in it? I feel like it should have been. Anyway,
it should have been. I think the Odessa is sort of suggested as being in it. Yeah. But although Superiority Burger, which is now in the former Odessa, next time you guys
I'm
go
more
to
of a
New York,
B&H dairy gal, but yes.
I do. Actually, in the real story, there's some of it happened at B&H. Yeah.
Okay, you do realize that after we're done.
Yeah. We're gonna go to drinks, and I'm gonna tell you the whole thing.
I mean, this is the perils of being a crime writer.
Right.
Is like, oh, my crime writer.
Also, the next time you go to New York, B&H is one of like the last few like real Jewish delis remaining in the East Village, and they have soup, which is good. But like the highlight is that if you order like a cup of soup, they will bring it to you with 2 slices of challah that are literally like this high stacked together, and like I think might even have like margarine on them.
Yeah, they do on both sides.
Because for kosher sort of thing, and like it's one of the great delights. But so everything is the city. Although I live in Brooklyn, I'm very happy to live in Brooklyn, and Vivian and her friend Justine treat the outer boroughs as though like you might catch like a terrible disease, if you set foot. So most of my life takes place in Brooklyn, but these characters are very Manhattan exclusively, but they do they do range all over the city.
Yeah. Well, you brought up Justine, and she's somebody I really wanted to discuss a little bit more, because she's the best friend. She is a character in her own right. I think I thought of her as like, she feels like an Eve Arden character is filtered through ketamine.
Yeah, very nice, thank you. I have often had best friends or close friends who are more exciting than me and more worldly than me, and I love those ladies. And I love a lady who's a bit of a tramp, which she is. And I also wanted
but
to
she
write,
also knows exactly who she is.
Well, exactly. I wanted to write someone who was a bit of a tramp, and unlike Vivian, entirely unconflicted about it. Like has no conflicts about it, which I think is such a beautiful thing.
It was also just really interesting the way you write Vivian and sex, because she doesn't really like it. It's very...
It's transactional.
It's not just transactional, it's almost like there's just no... I don't want to say that there's no there, but it's just like she's not getting any satisfaction at all, except in pretty maladaptive ways.
Yeah. I mean, look, this girl is a long list of maladaptive coping mechanisms. I think that we can all,
Yeah, I mean, like the way, like she uses alcohol to self-medicate.
Exactly.
She uses pills also to just get into an altered state. And at least like the way that you write about it, it feels very natural. Like she's just sort of like inhabiting these states. And there is like almost a dreamlike quality to them, but that's why it sort of puzzles me that people really seem to dislike her. I'm just like, no, that's who she is, or whatever.
Well, I mean, it was like, I hate breaking things down along gender lines, because I think it's so boring. It's so boring sometimes to be a lady and like to sort of see these things. But so I grew up on noir. Almost all of the heroes of noir are male, and a lot of those heroes drink a lot. And a lot of them, some of them have some like pretty rough sex, or sex where like the borders of consent are pretty blurry. And we're fine with that. We're so fine with that when it's a guy drinking whiskey. and like being mean to ladies. But when it's a lady drinking whiskey and someone's being mean to her, she's being a little mean, suddenly we're like, oh, I want better for her. And I get it, you know, I want better for her too. I want better for all of us. But
it's just that people are very uncomfortable sitting with the sometimes poor decision making that a woman would do, even if we might be used to it from men.
yeah, I think we get really, and that was a surprise. I didn't expect that discomfort, but it's come up even in some really positive reviews, I think.
It's so bizarre. Like, here we are, it's January 2024, and this is the exact criticism. I don't know if you read this particular novel. It's called Miami Purity by Vicki Hendricks.
Not yet.
Oh, you have to. So
Okay.
it was her.
Do you guys have it?
Miami Purity
Okay.
by Vicki
Okay.
Hendricks.
I'll get it after.
She wanted to do a gender flipped version of The Postman Always Rings Twice.
Oh, cool.
From a woman's perspective, and she's very unapologetic that she loves to have sex, and she's bad, and she is into it, and this was published in 1995, and people they went bananas.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I hate her, oh, she's terrible. It's like, do you not pay attention to women? Like, someone, this is not beyond the realm of possibility just because you might be uncomfortable with it.
It is weird.
But that particular recommendation aside, I wondered what other sort of noirish novels by women did you take inspiration from, or what you feel that Here in the Dark is a conversation with?
I mean, so when it comes to classic noir, there are almost no novels written by women that feature a female protagonist. There are novels written by women with male protagonists, and very rarely there are female protagonists in some of the more sort of domestic suspense, but honestly, not a lot. It's still pretty uncommon. But as I said, I do love Dorothy B. Hughes. If you haven't read In a Lonely Place, and especially a book that don't look up anything about it, The Expendable Man.
Yeah.
Don't Google. It's one of the great twist books, but like it's so good, and I went in not knowing the twist, and I was so happy. And it's so ahead of its time, I think. And Margaret Millar, who's like a big domestic suspense person for sure. And then, I love the contemporary writers, Megan Abbott, Laura Lippman, Sarah Gran, those are all people where I read all of
I mean,
their
Sarah
stuff.
Gran also did a sort of gender flip noir too.
Yeah.
It's dope.
Which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not really talked about as much anymore.
Yeah.
Partly because her Claire DeWitt books kind of took more center stage.
Those are also,
Those
if you
are amazing.
haven't, those are really great. Sarah Gran, Gran.
Yeah. But it's just interesting to sort of hear your sort of reading journey but were you reading these books as you were working on Here in the Dark, or they kind of predated it?
No, I think they predated it. I've always read detective fiction. I was someone who had read, it's good that I came through it okay. But like I'd read all of Agatha Christie by the time I was 12, and yet I survived and, managed to be not so racist. But I've always loved mysteries. I've always loved puzzle books, and so like that's just sort of been a constant.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just like reading, Sarah.
Oh, well, you're talking to the
Yeah,
person who just...
I know.
I mean, truthfully, if I had to choose between writing and reading, I'd still choose reading.
Yeah.
Which is why, like, being a book critic is kind of the best, because all I get to... they're paying me to read? What is this? There was another thing that you wrote about being a critic in your recent essay for The Guardian, which is, I don't know that a critic makes a great hero. I don't even know that a critic makes a good person. There's something at least a little weird about spending so much of your life in dialogue with art that can't see you, can't hear you, can't love you back. But isn't being in conversation with a piece of art actually, especially because of interpretation, that you are getting something back?
Oh, I mean, it's the best part of my life to be in adjacency to art without having to make art. I mean, oh my God, what a dream. Like I do. So my favorite place in New York City is, it's gonna sound weird, but just wait with me here. It's the BQ subway, but it's because the BQ goes over the Manhattan Bridge. And what that means is every time you're on the BQ, it tends to go kind of slow, and so suddenly you're between Brooklyn on one side and Manhattan on the other. The Manhattan Bridge is fine, but the Brooklyn Bridge is really like the beautiful one, and it's right there spread before you, and the East River sort of opening out into the bay. And like I tend to say a little prayer every time I'm over the bridge, and it's just thanks. Like, how great that I've gotten to spend my whole adult life in adjacency to art, you know, in theater. Because before I had kids, it was at the theater easily 5 nights a week, you know, for years and years and years, because I started when I was still in college, basically. And
I mean, you did an apprenticeship at the Boys Club.
when I was still in college, yeah. And so it's such a gift, and I love it so much. But it is a kind of weird, dreamy, slightly dissociated way to live, and I don't always know if it's that healthy to be in your head that much all the time, and to be engaging with something that's at a remove from you rather than the things that are right in front of you.
So how do you make sure that you're not totally in a cerebral space, that you can actually like touch something or, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you know, therapy helps. You know, I am a nice white lady in her 40s, and so like I do have a meditation practice, and so it is things like that that are just about sort of recentering and coming back, because I can go pretty far away. But I do think it's weird to have close personal relationships to art that doesn't know you. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience, maybe you have with like, I don't know, like TV stars or film stars you love, but I've had this happen multiple times where like there's a stage actor, somehow with stage it feels so much more immediate to me. And I've seen them for years, you know, in various plays, musicals, and then I run into them on the subway, on the bus, at a party, and I just go, oh, hi!
Because you feel like you know them.
And then there's this weird pause where I was like, right, you haven't been able to see me. Like, I've been in the dark all these years looking up at you, and I've been invisible, I've been anonymous. So, but you do somehow feel like you've had this like, but we've been through so much, you know? Like, I saw you lose your house, that was terrible. But it's all one way. Like, none of it, they don't know you.
Right.
And there is something kind of bizarre in that.
So how do you feel now that you have published a book and people can essentially have that similar relationship with your work and then thus feel that they know you?
Well, I mean, they can just DM. It's fine. We'll be friends. It's so nice. I think everyone should publish a book. You know, in Iceland, you probably know this, but in Iceland, which is a country of I think like 300-some thousand people, 1 out of every 10 people have published a book. So I say be Iceland. Like, you know, because it is so nice. And when you do events like these, people from various parts of your life sort of come out and you get to see them, and every so often you see someone walking around the world with your book, and like it is a delight. I mean, I don't know that I want to say like try to make a living off writing books, but publish one and then, you know, do something else for a living is the advice that I would give. Yeah.
I feel like that's a good opener for audience questions. I mean, I have many more, and Alexis and I can truly talk all day.
We have often at a Russian spot.
It's true.
Yeah, or sometimes a Korean spot.
Also,
yeah.
But needless to say, any questions that anyone might have, I'll try to repeat it back for in the mic for the benefit of those on the live stream. Yes.
You said how some of the places are real from New York. What about that joke shop?
Oh, the question was
the
some of the
magic shop.
yeah.
So it was the magic shop real. The magic shop, I mean, I have been to Tanner's Magic, which looks a little different and is not in the East Village, but what I was visualizing mostly is a weird kind of like witchy herbarium on 9th Street in the East Village for the location of the shop, and then sort of importing, I think, some of what I had seen at Tanner's. So yeah, kind of, yeah, in a kind of hodgepodgey way.
You had mentioned another book.
Yeah, so I got myself a 2-book deal, and what was funny about that was that I sold the second book on the strength of about 2 lines, 2 sentences, where I said that I wanted to write about a young woman who gets involved with an experimental theater company in the 1970s that might be a cult and runs away with them. And then I had to write it. And I have not run away with an experimental theater company, you know, and in the 1970s I was very small. And so there was this moment of, oh, do I know how to do this? Like, do I know how to make things up? And it turns out, I mean, fingers crossed, because I haven't gotten the notes back from my editor yet, but I'm looking around for wood to knock. Oh, here's some.
There's no.
I think I can. And yeah, I mean, the second part of this book is, is for when you have read, or when, like, that obviously that's all made up. So I knew that I could do it a little bit, but it was nice to know that I could see it all the way through.
What experience was writing the second book? How was it different from writing Here in the Dark, especially because it is, there's a cliche that like writing the second book is a lot harder than the first, and I wondered what challenges came up.
No, I don't know that it was, honestly, but that's because I've been a journalist for 25 years, and like I just have the training of you sit down at the computer when you have the time, and then you get up, and there had better be 500, 600, 1,000 words written, because you don't have that time back. I mean, especially because I have little kids. So I don't understand just in a strict physics sense how it got written, because like as far as I know, there are only 24 hours in the day, and I know how much else I was doing, so it seems to me a little impossible. But the writing itself was not more difficult. There was a moment when I thought, oh, this is terrible, and how embarrassing to be writing something so terrible. But then when
Was that in the middle?
well, it was actually pretty early. But then
interesting.
I went back and read, and I was like, no, this is not so terrible. And also, you need a draft in order to make it good. Like, you can't make good out of a void. You can't make good out of nothing. So I knew that as long as I had something on the screen, I could then make it into something good.
There was one other line from the book that made me laugh, and it kind of relates to deadline writing. and
One
it's-
line, one.
One out of many,
The whole
but I
book.
didn't
Thank
transcribe
you.
them all because I'm not going to do that.
One line, one funny line, yeah.
I bring it up because it's also about like deadline writing and the relationship that Vivian has with her editor Roger, which is also like very complicated and quite funny in its own way too. And she describes how he has deleted most of my more egregious wordplay, but as I write those puns just for him, I don't mind. The reason I laughed is when I last had a proper day job, I used to be a book publishing reporter, I would put in certain things, and in my head I would call them for internal use only, because I wanted my then boss to read them, but I knew they'd get cut.
Oh, yeah.
So I just wondered, like, how much, are you still doing that?
I did it more with my first editor at The Voice, Brian Parks, because I knew he loved just like absolutely terrible wordplay. And so I've calmed down on it a little bit now, but it sneaks in. It sneaks in every so often. And every so often I'll be like, wait, I thought you were going to cut that. Like I don't know if you've seen the new True Detective, but for the Times I just wrote the lead up to the new True Detective, which is set in Alaska, and at the end of the episode, a bunch of bodies are discovered frozen together in ice, and I wrote, talk about a cold case, and they left it in, and I was like, no.
I read that, I was like, I can't believe that guy.
No, you weren't supposed to leave that in. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm interested in the gestation period of this, since this is based on this experience you had in your 20s.
Yeah, like almost 20 years ago now. So I didn't write the first draft until, so when you write a doctoral dissertation, many of you probably know this, there's this nightmare thing that happens where you've worked on it for years and years and years and years, and you finish it, and then you submit it, and then nothing happens for like 4 months, because they insist on reading it, and like, I don't know, paying attention, like how dare they? Like all you want to know is like, is it fine? Is it okay? And you know it is, because they wouldn't have let you get to this point if they were going to fail you at this moment. But then again, like there are
The
these,
anxiety's real.
but there are these urban legends, you hear stories. And I just needed something to do with my hands. And so I wrote the first version of it then when I was 33. But then I got married, and then I got pregnant. Then I got pregnant again, and there just wasn't any time.
And you had a job.
No,
You had-
and
you-
I mean, I've had 2 jobs my whole life. It's just that at one point one of them became journalist, and like I was my own full-time nanny. Then my marriage ended, and I had more childcare than I ever had in my entire life. We're good. It's amicable. But he suddenly had the kids for like 2.5, 3 days a week, and I was like, oh, I have time to write. And so I finally wrote So I revised and got a draft I was really happy with, got an agent I loved, and then it was so it was incredibly slow, and then it was incredibly quick. So, yeah, I mean, getting separated and revising the book and getting the agent and selling it, that was probably less than 6 months. So.
And what sort of, I guess, editorial notes, like how much work did you have to do after Flatiron, your publisher, bought it?
Right, I mean, I had to not make her such a bitch. So funny, because it's true. In the original version, she was perhaps even more brittle, and the goal wasn't necessarily to make her likable.
Because we all know that likable is a kind of
That's
a
all we
dirty
want.
word.
That's all we want out of women. We just want to like them. But to make her more sympathetic and to understand her motivations better. And then there was also some encouragement to push it a little bit more into the thriller genre, whereas before it had, I think, walked the line of genre fiction and literary fiction, and this was pushing it more towards genre fiction. And I love genre fiction, and I don't think that those were bad notes. I mean, I've never said like, oh, you know what I hated about this book? It was too exciting. Like I wanted to turn the pages too much. Like, oh, there was just, you know, I never feel that. I love when things are exciting. I love when you want to race to know what happens in the next chapter. So if there was a little bit of sort of ginning that up in some of the chapter ends, I think it's to the good.
Everyone in the book is so wonderfully flawed, with the exception of your the character who does all the weather effects.
Oh,
It seems
Charlie.
Charlie,
Everyone loves Charlie.
who's just seemingly so perfect,
You know-
and you keep giving him opportunities to fail her, and he never does. And
Charlie got nicer, I will say. That was another note.
I was so suspicious of Charlie.
Well, Charlie, as written originally, was like, there was a little bit of like the satire of the nice guy. There's a kind of guy who feels, I think, like you owe him something just because he's nice. Like just because he's nice and a stand-up guy, like that should be enough, you know.
Well, because more often than not, we've met guys like that, and they actually turn out to have that undercurrent of rage, but they're masking it. It's what I think of as like the weaponization of niceness.
Yeah, and so there was more of that, but there was a feeling editorially that like it was nice to have like one thing to kind of root for. And I was like, really? And then I was like, sure. It's nice to have one thing to
I mean,
root
he
for.
also contrasts with another key character who I hope you'll have some time to talk to, which is the cop.
Yeah.
It's Dusty.
Yeah. So, yeah.
He reminded me a lot of the cop character in The Cut, and I wondered,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, he's bad news, huh? But every so often. Yeah.
And yet,
And
you
yet.
still want to keep reading about it.
Yeah.
I thought that the good doctor was gonna be the David Agnew. Did you do that on purpose? Because we never meet.
Well, I don't want to spoil
That's
too
a
much
spoiler.
for people who haven't read it yet, but or do we? You know, so I may let that one go. But you can email me after.
I feel like if there are more questions from the audience, I'd love to hear that. And if there isn't, then I will ask the final one, which is, what did you feel that writing Here in the Dark sort of showed you about the relationship between performance and what we want to be our actual selves, but we strive so hard and then don't get there?
I mean, I will say I have an obsession with social performance that started really, really young. My parents, as Allie knows, are very difficult people, and I just, as a child and then an adolescent, like I did not know how to behave because the models at home were so like weird and off and erratic. I really hope my mom's not watching this live stream. I love my mom very much. We're good now. And so when I was like a tween, I guess, or a young teenager, like I used to read etiquette guides, like for fun, just to try to sort of figure out human behavior.
You're trying to hack human behavior?
I was trying to hack
Wow.
human, I know, which is, and
Sorry.
it just, I feel like it took a really long time to just sort of, I think I was a pretty performative person through high school, through college, and it just took a long time to sort of settle into who I was and not feel that I needed to do more than that. That said, I think that we sometimes set up what I think of as a false binary between performance and authenticity. Because my feeling is that we all perform. I mean, I'm performing differently with you now than I would if I were at home with my kids, and I'll perform a little differently, like if hopefully, you know, we go out for drinks later,
Yeah, absolutely.
right?
And likewise
You know,
as well.
but that doesn't mean I'm not being myself here, and it doesn't mean I'm not being myself when I'm with my children. Like, you know, I believe, you know, Freud's idea of the psychopathology of the everyday self, Erwin Goffman, the wonderful sociologist, you know, his idea of social performance is something that I'm very influenced by. So I think that we all perform. It's just that the character in this book feels a need to perform more than most, because she doesn't feel
There's no
There's no
she doesn't
center.
feel that she has a personality.
Yeah, there's no center there, and so she has to perform it. And so maybe it's a journey toward figuring out who she is, and like maybe there's a possibility that she can build up to a self that feels authentic to her. But I think it can be hard to be a person. Like it's hard to, you know, we're squirmy things
Well,
with these
Sheila Heti wrote a whole novel called How Should a Person Be, which
Yeah.
gets into this.
But we have these soft underbellies, and it's so hard to have feelings. And like, I mean, God, walking around in New York, you need some kind
Oh
of
my
a
God.
carapace.
It's all
you know?
armor all the time.
You need some kind of self-protection, and I don't think any of that's necessarily bad. But I think the more that you can sit with yourself, and that you can sit with discomfort and sit with feelings instead of trying to sort of like drink or pill or sex your way out of them, you know, or numb yourself. I think that's probably good, but it's not easy.
No, living in the discomfort, it's what we have to do, but it is the hardest thing to do.
What a bummer way to end this, Sarah.
Well, do you want to find some other ending? Or?
No.
Well,
We'll keep it real.
Sounds
Yeah.
good. Thank you all so much for
Yeah,
coming,
thank
and
you.
especially thank you to Alexis for writing this amazing book and for being here tonight. And bookstore, a wonderful store.